My name's Richard Jackson. I'm an artist, and within that I would also classify myself as a sculptor, a craftsman, a maker, and a materials-based working person. I share the workshop with Sally Fawkes, my wife and partner in business, and the workshop is based just outside Stroud in Gloucestershire in the UK. I make sculptures in cast glass and exhibit through galleries. I work to commission. Most of the work I've done is done speculatively. The commissions usually come from people who have seen my work and want something specific for a particular position or even a special occasion. I was just on holiday one day and I saw hot glass being blown, and it was just complete captivation. Eventually, after sort of lots of investigating, because when you don't know a field at all, it's actually quite hard to find the door in. I found about a course up in the West Midlands at Briley Hill, which it was later called the International Glass Centre. I loved the sense of dance as I perceived it, where you're working with the hot glass. It gives off its own light when it's hot, and that is incredibly seductive, I think. It is a very seductive material. The second course that I did following that was a degree course at Farnham, where I was able to go on the experimental part of the learning journey, taking what I've learned in terms of technique and process and applying it to my ideas. But I very soon discovered that with the hot blown glass, there were limitations which I couldn't overcome. In terms of the making, the forms I wanted to generate and the scale that I wanted to work at. I went and worked for a couple of years in the States, in the San Francisco Bay Area, working with an artist there who worked on very large scale cast pieces. And that opened my eyes a lot to scale and potential. I started working by slumping and bending thick float glass, which initially started with sort of fairly simple vessel forms, which I then carved with the handheld saw. It worked for me for a while until I became more interested in what I would describe as a fully sculptural form, in terms of it having more volume, or some volume properly. My first cast piece was probably much larger than I should have done for a first one, but I immediately found that was where I should be. I have no idea really how to define my sources of inspiration, because they're so varied that you can only really say I'm inspired by everything to some extent. One of the series that I've been working with for 18 years, maybe 20 years, there's a series called From Past Memory. And the initial starting point, the inspiration for that, was a ring of standing stones up on the Orkneys. The ring is called the Ring of Brogar. And most people, when they think of standing stones, the image that springs to mind would be Stonehenge, but the stones up there are very different. The stone that it comes from is slightly akin to a slate. So the form of the stones is a lot slimmer and much less regular in terms of the shapes, the way they stand. And I've got two examples here which I can show you. One is this piece here, which has just come out of the kiln. The only thing that's happened to it so far is the mould has been cleaned off it and it's ready to be started on with the cold working. The mould with the glass in here is the next one in the series from past memory. So it gives you some indication of how the construction starts off and how it ends up in the piece. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to wet this piece and then I'll stand it up. So making the surface wet just means that we're able to see into the piece a lot clearer. So I'll wet this side as well. Okay. And then if I stand it up in the light here like that, it's not fantastically easy to see, but I think if you look carefully, you can see the veils and the bubbles. The bubbles have been trapped where two pieces of glass have melted together. And the glass is arranged in different ways here. So here you can see there's a stacking going on. And here, I think you can just about see there's a whole array of bubbles here. And that's where two pieces of glass have been laid on top of each other there. And that's the way of building up the information within the body of the cast. And all of that, of course, once the grinding has been done and the polishing is done, all of that becomes so much more visible. It took me about 5 years, 7 years to work through the process in my head of what I wanted to do and why. It can be a complete sense of deja vu, but that's not really what it's about. It's more the idea that other people have been there, other lives have lived there, other people have existed there, and it's the feeling that you get in that place, in that situation, at that time, because you might go there again and you don't get the same feeling. So some of the pieces have been in completely transparent, colourless optical glass, one piece, very pure looking. Other pieces have been made from multiple pieces of glass melted together. The reason I'm doing that is to provide imagery within the body, the volume of the glass. Once I've shaped and polished the piece, I've become known, if you like, for carving the surface of the glass. And again, that's another layer of language, another layer of imagery. The form of a piece is probably the most important aspect of any piece of work to me. In taking the opacity away from the surface of the material, doesn't exactly disguise, but it almost makes the form start to disappear. If you were working with stone or metal, say cast bronze, the face you're looking at is all you can see. There's the reverse of the piece, but you don't get to see that until the piece is turned around. With glass as a transparent material, you have a completely different dynamic going on. And I find fascinating the aspect of, as you're looking at one face, you're seeing the reverse of another and how they both interact with each other. Sometimes it's in a very complementary way, sometimes it's in a contradictory way, but it always gives a whole nother layer of language to a piece of work. Another way of working for me is actually to produce, in effect, a block of glass. So it'd be like a sculptor selecting a block of marble or another stone and visualizing within it the form that you want to generate. Now, so I am first of all generating my material, Right, so this is another cast that's just come out of the kiln. It's just been demolded and washed down. And as you can see, it's really quite opaque looking at the moment. It's made from a very unique type of sheet of blue-green glass that I've got a very limited stock of. And the reason I've cast it in this way is because I want to keep a very straight, regimented move or lack of movement within the body of the glass. And as you can see, I've just put in sections of glass vertically through here, and then on a couple of them I've subdivided them. So this is the only way I can keep it all straight and organized in the truest of sense is to cast it as a solid block, which means that I now will have to carve the form entirely from this. There's no cast shape to this, and as you can see, just these very rough pen drawings on here. This is the approximate form that I'll be working to. It gives me just a bit of a visual guideline for when I'm actually starting to carve. You can't see it in this form, but the finished piece, the finished glass, has just got the most wonderful jade green look from it. It just looks absolutely exquisite. I think one of the key things to surviving is to keep moving forward, just being open to new input, and the idea that you might need to completely change in some aspect what you're doing. I've always thought that a piece of sculpture, any piece of artwork, it's a split-second statement, even if it's taken weeks, months to produce. It's a split-second statement of a focused moment of clarity where you have decided on a particular thing that you're trying to talk about. So your ideas can never stand still because there's always fresh input coming in, and even if you've completely worked through a series in your mind and you think you've come to the end of it, there'll always be something new coming along. So that idea of always moving forward with your work and keeping it, and so it stays fresh. It's not a conscious choice to keep it fresh, it is what happens. I've always made things in some respect, some way or another. When I was a kid, I count myself very lucky. I grew up in the country. There were lots of gravel pits around us, so you'd have enormous piles of sand. Probably shouldn't have been there, but you could play with. And typically my playing with them was just looking back on it now, it's quite interesting. It's you sort of recognise what you were doing with your hands, even if you didn't really know then. If I could have put a more experienced head on my shoulders back then, I would probably have said, I need a workshop. Let's face it, I spend most of my life here. I spend more time here than at home. And coming down here and working is a joy. It's fun. It's not going to work, it's going out to have fun, which is the way it should be, even if it is hard work. So the workshop is immensely important. For one commission, we built a wall in here. It was an 8-metre long wall commission. In fact, there were two of them. It was two sister ships, completely different commissions, but the wall was used for both of them. So we had a section of wall made because it was curved, so that each of the elements of the commission could then be fitted to the wall and make sure everything was working properly. So yeah, without having the workshop that we've built a lot of the work that we've done we wouldn't have been able to do. But it is a massive commitment. I always say that, you know, if we wanted to move house, that'd be easy. But moving the workshop, it's, you know, that would be one hell of a job. It's not something I'd want to undertake. Having worked in quite a number of different jobs before I became an artist, some of them mentally taxing, some of them physically taxing, I've got to say that being an artist is the hardest job I've ever done. The buck stops with you. It all comes back to you. And maintaining your practice and the business side of everything is something that sometimes I wonder how it's all kept together. I think the most important thing is that you've got to be into it heart and soul. I can't imagine doing anything else now, apart from the fact I think I'm probably completely unemployable. I love what I do. The best days are spent in the workshop with your hands dirty, getting on with making a piece.